Scalp inflammation will make treatment less effective. So if you want to have full potential of treatment with, for example, minoxidil and finasteride, you have to address scalp inflammatory problems if you are having them. So in this video, I will talk about inflammation. I will talk about what I experienced when I was having inflammation and how I addressed it and I was able to solve this problem myself. For you guys who are nutritional, my name is Alex. I'm a certified tricologist, and previously I was a hair loss sufferer. Was dealing with hair loss for almost a decade before I was able to regrow back my own hair. And since then, I have helped thousands of guys do the same. So if you are having problems with the hair loss or treatments not working, book a session below this video. There's a link for it. Let's speak and find a solution to your problem once and for all. So when it comes to inflammation, like what often is seen as inflammation, like it's often describes multiple things that can be causing an issue on the scalp. It could be, for example, seborrheitis, psoriasis, dermatitis, for example, folliculitis, like there are fungal problems, like they can fall into category of being described as a scalp inflammatory problem. But scalp inflammation itself, it can also be just a localized issue, but it can be a combination of those factors, right? So for example, let's say someone has a seborrheitis, right? So seborrheitis by itself may not necessarily cause hair loss, but when it happens in combination with inflammation, then it will often cause hair loss, right? It weakens the follicles, and then you will see, for example, that flakes, let's say you see flakes from seborrheitis, they would have a hair into the flakes itself, and they fall off. The flakes that fall off, they will have hair attached to them, and there will be more itchiness, more redness, and burning sensation possibly. Like those would be according if there is seborrheitis with inflammation. But if you are having just inflammation by itself, for example, then it would be more like a redness, more like a burning sensation, for example. Could also be a lot of itchiness, for example. Like when I first started to notice my inflammatory problems, which happened around October 2010, and if you have seen my previous videos, you have seen that I had very good results from finasteride back in 2010. But then what happened is that in October 2010, I was traveling in different climate. I was having different diet, and I was also by that time I was a bit overweighted, and I was using different water in terms of like shower water. That all together caused that I would have a lot of issues on my scalp. And it first started, but I noticed that there were more greasiness to my scalp. It would be more oiliness, more excessive sebum. The hairs that were falling out, they would have yellow bulbs at the end of them, and there was quite a lot of itchiness on my scalp and burning sensation. And what happened next is that my scalp became more and more red, and the more red it became, the more shedding there was. And that was basically inflammatory problem in combination with fungal issues, that was according for me. And it just keep getting worse and worse. And in 2011, like end of January 2011, it become really bad. Like my shedding had gone on for the last 3 months from October 2010. On the end of January 2011, it became so much worse. And I was in a panic because I didn't know what to do, because treatment with finasteride, for example, had completely stopped working. There was no effect anymore for finasteride. And the hair loss just keep getting worse, and my inflammation just become more and more intense. And at that point, I already had been able to kind of control more the fungal angle of the issue, right? Because fungal angle, you can't control it with antifungal agents such as ketoconazole. Like that was something I did apply in January 2011. It did help me to reduce that fungal problem, and my greasiness on the scalp had become better, but the problem was that my scalp also reacted negatively to ketoconazole shampoo, like Nizoral, and that caused that I would have also more itchiness and more redness to my scalp. And then what happened in February, what I did is that I started to apply topical steroids to my scalp, and it kind of helped me suppress that inflammation, and I actually was able to start to see growth at some point in 2011 from approaching this problem with steroids. But the thing with steroids is that it is something that is a short-term solution if the problem is more systematical, right? So if, for example, if your issue with inflammation is just on the scalp itself, then applying steroids can be helpful to address it. But if it's more like systematical, like in my case, with the leaky gut issues, with the trigger foods, overweight, and lifestyle that is not active enough, like all those things caused that I was having a lot of internal systematic inflammation. And then when I applied topical steroids, it did help me, but the problem was that if I stopped with topical steroids, my inflammation would come back again, and I would have more hair fall, more redness. And I did try it multiple times, because when one starts with steroids, for example, one has to take a break from it from time to time. And each time I did take a break, I had more hair falling out. And that continues, like that pattern continues through whole 2011. And at some point I decided that this was enough. I had to find a real solution to the problem. And that was when I started to work on my gut health. I started to work on foods and diet. I also started working on detoxification, scalp balance, and addressing my lifestyle, and doing many things basically to improve circulation, to improve oxygen flow, and also reduce overall inflammation, which again helped me to address the problem. And what happened in 2012? At the end of 2012, I actually was able to reduce my inflammation to minimum, and it was almost perfect. But then what happened is that at the end of 2012, like December 2012, I got a sunburn on my scalp. And since I have learned so much already previously how to address inflammation, I was able to address that sunburn in around 2 months mark. But it did cause me a lot of damage back in 2013, like January 2013, after the sunburn in December. I had a lot of damage in terms of shedding, in terms of like my hair become very fried, like a very thin in structure, and there was a lot of shedding. And basically what happened next is that as I addressed that sunburns that I had on my scalp, I still didn't see the thickening effect I had before of addressing inflammation. Right? So what happened basically by addressing that sunburn problem, I was still not seeing results from the treatments that I was doing back then. And back in 2013, when I finally had the scalps to resolve the inflammation and everything was fine, I was able to start with minoxidil, because prior to that I was not able to apply minoxidil, because each time I applied minoxidil, even gentle formulation, it would cause more burning sensation, more itchiness, and of course more shedding. And when I solved my inflammatory problems, I was able to apply minoxidil and I was able to get amazing results with the treatment. So this is basically my story of addressing inflammation, and since then I haven't had any inflammation at all.
There is a connection between scalp inflammatory problems and gut health, and in this part of the video I will show you what you need to understand on how the gut health can impact your scalp inflammation, and basically what you need to do to address this problem. So here is an example of leaky gut conditions, and we have two pictures here. So on the left side we have normal gut, on the right side we have leaky gut conditions. And if you look at the picture of normal gut, you can see that there are multiple things that are very different compared to the gut that has problems. So first of all, we can see this mucus lining is like a gel type liquid lining that is on top of gut lining, and you can see that it is something that looks clear and fluid, right? And then you have junctions beneath there, and those junctions are tied together. They are tied together, right? And that what it does, it helps to prevent food particles, bad bacteria, toxins, viruses get into the bloodstream, right? So this is how healthy gut looks like. But if there are leaky gut conditions, what happens is that mucus lining is broken, right? You can see in the pictures here, it gets broken, and the junctions itself become loose. Right, so they become loose and wide, and what happens as a result, like a consequence of it, is that the food particles, viruses, bad bacteria, toxins, all of them can start to leak into the bloodstream, which again causes there is more issues, for example, with skin reactions in terms of scalp inflammatory problems or inflammation in general, and also in terms of immune responses, for example, and it can cause immune diseases and different immune conditions. But this is something that is important to work on address, right? Because it is a problem, and for example, if you are having gut health problems or leaky gut issues, it doesn't have to be severe, but it still can be a problem, and that can again cause that, for example, treatment is not going to work, or you will have more DHT sensitivity, or you will have more shedding, for example, other immune problems that is occurring, and this is something that has to be addressed. And in terms of addressing it, so first of all, you have to address mucus lining, right? So you have to have foods, for example, and supplements that helps to rebuild mucus lining, and also you need to be sure that the foods you are having, they are not compromising that lining, that it helps actually to repair it, to heal it, and rebuild it. And same with those junctions, right? You can see the junctions itself, they become inflamed in leaky gut conditions, right? So you have to reduce that inflammation, and you also have to make sure that you are addressing, for example, food sensitivities, right? This is also important. And then you also want to be sure that you're addressing, for example, bad bacteria, addressing toxins, for example, and getting a good gut biome with good bacteria. You get enough foods that are helping you to have a good gut biome, and feeds a good bacteria with fiber, for example, right type of fiber. Like those things are very important, right? And the severity of those gut issues would also like it is individual, right? And timeline, how long it would take to recover the gut itself would depend on severity of the problems, right? And also how diligent are you to address them. But it is something that is fully possible to address, because I did have a leaky gut conditions myself in 2011, 2012. I was dealing with them for a long time, but I was able to fix it. And by fixing my leaky gut issues, I was able to fix my scalp inflammation, right? And basically, when you have fixed your scalp inflammation, the treatment becomes so much more effective in terms of getting results, in terms of seeing less hair fall, for example, in terms of having issues that could be preventing the treatment of working properly. And if you solve those problems, then you can have much better effect from treatment, and of course, overall health. So this is my take on it. And additionally, like if you do repair the gut lining and you make your gut strong, then you can also have foods that is right now trigger foods, right? So for example, for me in the past, when I would have bread, for example, or if I would have, let's say, some sweets or sugary foods, for example, they would cause a lot of inflammation for me. Like what I would notice that I would have a redness on my scalp, I would have a tension on my scalp, I would have itchiness, burning sensation on my scalp, but those things are not a problem anymore after I healed my gut, right? So now I can have some foods, for example, some processed foods, bread, sugary foods, I can have them and it's not going to cause issue for me. But in the past, when I had leaky gut issues, it was a huge problem. So my point here is that it is possible to recover from those problems, and it is possible to readjust and re-add foods in diets that previously was a problem, but if your gut is healthy, you can still have them. So that's my take on it. And
as I spoke in the beginning of this video, inflammation on the scalp, it is very important to address it because it weakens your follicles. Like when you weaken your follicles, it also makes them more affected by DHT, which again will mineralize them and also cause that the hair loss will continue to progress. So addressing inflammation is very important. And also additionally, it is also dangerous or possibilities that inflammation can become chronic around the follicles, which can cause damage that can be very hard to recover from, right? So inflammation, it is something that you need to take seriously and address it as soon as possible. And other thing with inflammation, like I spoke about my experience of having, for example, fungal problems in my scalp, and then I also had a scalp inflammatory problem, and then later on I had dermatitis, for example, my scalp, like those things were combined together, right? But often what happens is that it's a bit hard to say which is causing the main problem, right? So what I would suggest doing if you are having multiple issues, let's say, for example, you have inflammation and seborrheitis, is that to work on that inflammation first, and then afterwards work on seborrheitis. And when you do things, for example, to address, let's say, inflammation, and you have other secondary problem as well, like what happens is that the inflammation starts to decrease. So we can look into the scale, for example, from 0 to 10. Let's say 0 is no inflammation at all, and 10 is very high, intense inflammation, a lot of burning sensation, a lot of itchiness, a lot of redness. Like if you are starting to work on, let's say, multiple problems you're having, and you start to work on the primary problems, then you may reduce that overall inflammation down to, let's say, from 0 to 10 down to 7, for example, or 6. And then you start to work on secondary problems, and you can reduce inflammation down. As you keep working on each of those issues, it can get down to, let's say, 1 to 0, right? Which 0 would be ideal situation. And this is how I was able to do it, right? Because I saw what issues I was having, and this is how I addressed the inflammation, right? So I analyzed my situation. I did keep daily tracker, for example, and journaling over the problems I was having. And I saw over time what things improved in terms of my hair situation, in terms of my inflammatory problems, in terms of how I overall felt. Like I had all the markers that I did in terms of journaling, right? And did help me to address the problem in a more systematic and more structured way. And if you have, for example, a structure to this approach, it makes it so much easier to see when you are doing things correctly and what else you need to address and work on, right? So having a daily tracking system is very important. And this is something I also recommend for guys, for example, in my program, is that we do have a tracking, right? So they have to fill out daily tracker where they put the markers of how they are improving their situation, right? And if they are not improving something, or there's something is lacking, then it is very easy to see what is possible problem. Is it because of slackened diet? Is it because of the scalp imbalance? Is it because of other environmental factors, right? It is very easy to see what is the issue when you have a daily tracker. So if you are having inflammatory problems, if you are dealing, for example, with online issues that is affected or caused by multiple factors, then tracking can be very helpful for you. So those are things I want to share with you in today's video, guys. And once again, if you are struggling with the hair loss, if you are struggling with online problems, and you are still not seeing, for example, result from treatment, even if you have done it for multiple months, then get hold of a free form of workbook, or book a session below this video and see if my program can help you in terms of your hair recovery. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and see you next time.